Hey, welcome to the 6th gathering of the Guild Meetup. Today, Shane Evans will take us on a quest to discover how to automate video game tests. Really cool technique coming your way, so definitely stay tuned for the whole meetup. But first, some very quick things before we get into our journey. To make this fun for everyone, I ask that everyone please participate. And the way to do that is we actually have a chat feature. So if you go to the chat option in the chat, we can speak among ourselves. Hey Nupam, hey Rashi, hey Raghu, hey Justin. So everyone just interact with one another in the chat. And if you have a question for Shane, you just need to click on that questions tab. So we'll be getting right into our Jeep. So that's how we interact with one another using that chat. And if you have any questions, just click on the questions tab. All this is being recorded as well, so you'll get a recording after the event. I do a little editing, so you'll probably get it next week, early next week. Okay, some other things to go over here. Just so you know, shameless plug is that 2 weeks from today, we have the Perf Guild going on, which is an online conference dedicated 100% to helping you succeed with your performance testing and engineering efforts. Register now. Just go to perfguild.com. And thanks for joining the meetup. Use the code GUILDCOIN50 and get $50 off your ticket price. I actually have a cool graphic. Let me play it so you see what to play. And just use GUILDCOIN50. All right, and even though this is an online event, I don't think I have to say this, but just in case, we still have a code of ethics. So to check it out, all you need to do is go to guildconferences.code. And basically, it just boiled down to be awesome to each other. Let's help each other. We're all here to learn. And anything else, keep it awesome. And I can't continue without saying I have to give a big shout out to the sponsors of the Test Guild Meetup, which is Testum. And Testum wanted to give back to the community during this time of need. So make sure to check out their free community plan, which I think has over 1,000 runs per month. The offer doesn't last forever, so you definitely want to get in on it. Click on the button below. It says register now. Show some love to Testum. Lock in your deal here with their community plan by clicking on that register now. All right, so Shane will be joining us. He is the CEO and co-founder of GameDriver, Inc. He's worked in the enterprise software space for over 20 years. You probably know of him if you've done anything with performance testing. He's focused mainly on test automation for some of the most well-known products on the market. As I mentioned, very popular vendor tool. Shane has worked on it. So Shane started GameDriver with the intent of bringing the experience to the masses to grow the video game market where quality is key. And I think it has a really unique solution that I haven't heard from anyone. I've interviewed over 300 people on my podcast, and Shane is the first one to bring up this type of solution. So I'm really excited to get him in here. So Shane, just so you know, we're about to go live, and we'll be bringing Shane in 1 second. Hey Shane, welcome to the Guild.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Before we get into it, anything you want to share with the Guild before you get into your presentation?
No, just really excited to be here. There's been a great response, even just from the announcements, and really looking forward to sharing what we've built. We've got a great community we've built around testing and test automation. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a great crew. They always ask a lot of questions, so really excited to see what they have today. Hey, Adita. All right, Shane, the Guild floor is yours. The Guild Hall doors are open, and you're in charge.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen and get into 2 hours of slides. Just kidding. No, I just wanted to give a kind of high-level overview of what we're doing at GameDriver before I dive in and get to the heart of it and demonstrate how it works. This is a company that was founded in May of 2018, but actually the journey started much earlier, probably as far back as 2016, when I got into game development as a hobby. As you know, I was working in the enterprise software test automation space. I was managing some key products for large enterprises, and on the side, I play video games. I've always played video games, and I wanted to get into game development. Took some online courses, built some small projects, nothing really fancy. I'm not, as it turns out, that skilled in game development, but I do enjoy it. But one thing I noticed at the time was that there wasn't a whole lot in terms of capabilities around test automation. So I started asking people that I knew in the industry, friends, colleagues over the years, what do you do when it comes time to test these projects? And some that I knew at very large studios, very well-known studios like EA, that they basically told me that when it comes time to test the project, they give it to they give it to testers, and the testers just play it. They play it, and they play it, and they play it, and then they give feedback. And that feedback was, incredibly inconsistent. What you get from one team versus another, onshore, offshore, would vary wildly. And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was the same story as when I got into software testing back in the early 90s for a large financial institution. And I was in the QA team at the time, and we were just starting to even think about software test automation. But here's the gaming industry that had been around for 35 years and had really evolved in terms of development practices, did not have a lot in the way of testing, at least not for what we consider like quality assurance professionals and expertise. Really, it's just a very low skilled kind of job description for the most part. Now, I'm generalizing. I've met some very advanced teams that have built some very cool stuff on their own, but we'll get into that a little bit further as we go. So I started GameDriver with the intent of kind of reinventing software testing for video games. And I knew from the beginning this was going to be a very difficult technical challenge. Games are not like web pages. They're not like SAP or any other sort of standardized enterprise software. Every game is unique. And even if they're built on the same engines, the game's implementations vary wildly. The menus, what certain objects do, how you interact. And the whole key to gaming success is that sort of uniqueness. So when something comes along, I don't know if you remember Flappy Bird, which was like a big hit for a while. It was just this really silly bird, right? And you would tap on the screen and that would make the bird go up. And if you didn't tap, the bird would start to fall. And that was a huge success, but it was because it was so novel in its approach. It was something that nobody had ever done. And that's what makes games really exciting. So how do you make something that can interact with games that's repeatable, that helps with the productivity of testers, and really reduces a lot of the waste? So one of the companies that we talked to had something like 1,500 employees for testing, for just the play testing. And they would work in shifts around the clock. So you had first, second, and third shifts for these test teams. I think they're located in Dallas. And that's a lot of time spent, and they would test the same things over and over and over again. And so how do you really reduce the amount of waste in a team like that and get them thinking about sort of out of the box testing? Some of these games are getting so massive and complex that can be really challenging. And feel free, Joe, to interrupt if anything really interesting comes across the line. I'm happy to jump in and answer anything interactively.
That's a good point, Shane. So, folks, just so you know, if you have any questions, Guild, for Shane, just throw them up, and I'll ask them as we go along. So I'll use the question feature if you have a question specifically for Shane, and we'll keep track of it that way. And like I said, Shane, this is not a recording. This is live, so Shane is able to show you, based on questions, how the journey will unfold. So get your questions in for Shane. If you have any, I will ask them. Thank you, Shane, for that.
Sure. So one thing we found as well in the gaming space is that the sort of spend or the budget allocated for testing is very similar to what we would expect in enterprise software, but the stakes are much, much higher. And I'll get into that in a second, but roughly 20 to 30% of the overall budget is spent on quality. But in this environment, the majority of that spend is on bodies, on just getting more and more people. And when games go to market, there's a huge expectation of success from the onset. So there's usually these trade shows or gaming conventions. I've been to a few, like PAX, East West, E3, where they show off these games and they start getting pre-orders, right? So you get a lot of early feedback. And those pre-orders means that you're kind of on the hook to deliver when you say you're going to deliver. And let's say your game is supposed to launch for the holiday season, and you've gotten $100 million in pre-orders, and then the demo comes out, and the demo gets really poor reviews. That sort of thing can really hit the bottom line of a gaming project. And these games, by the way, are not short-lived projects. They now go on to span multiple years or even decades. Some of the biggest titles in gaming, like the one at the top of this list, Grand Theft Auto 5, huge success, made actually $1 billion on opening weekend, which is not something that a lot of enterprise software sort of professionals are used to. That's an entire organization's sort of revenue for a year in many cases. And that game has continued on for many years. It's gone on to make billions of dollars, and was actually available for free yesterday on the Epic Store, which brought down the Epic Store. For those of you performance heads out in the audience, if you're thinking of the news of the damned in terms of performance, look at the crash of the Epic Store yesterday. It was quite amazing.
Well, I need to jot
Hundreds
that
of
down.
thousands of people.
Wow.
So, what we see here is that the initial feedback from a game can really impact its bottom line. We gave the example here of No Man's Sky, which had a ton of hype for years and was supposed to revolutionize the gaming industry because they procedurally generated their environments. It was very cool technically, but had some major gaps upon launch. And I will say that game has gone on to kind of fix itself over the last few years, and they've repeatedly added additional features and fixed a lot of the problems that were found initially. And it's a great game. It's beautiful now. But could they have done better if the initial launch was a success? Absolutely, as shown by some of these other examples. So quality is really key in this space. And GameDriver attempts to bring test automation to this space, which gives developers, testers, and game producers an ability that they didn't have before, which is to kind of automate the early verification process and all of those kind of repeatable, low-hanging tasks that are taking up a lot of time from the testers, so that you can focus on other things. So you can really explore the bounds of the game and get into those sort of use cases that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And going back to that example of No Man's Sky, I got that game on launch and I played through it and I was really enjoying it. But at one point, and it's a space game, by the way, if you've never heard of it, at one point I was thinking, what happened if I turned my ship at the sun and flew into that? I was kind of bored and it was the weekend. So I literally pointed my ship at the sun and in this procedurally generated solar system, and I flew towards it. Well, as you know, what I found out is when you reach the sun, nothing happens. There's no sun. It was just like a light source. It wasn't a physical object. I guess they didn't think, somebody's going to go and fly into the sun. But this is the kind of things that gamers do. And being from a quality background, I tend to explore these things quite a bit. So some of the capabilities that we have today include support for PC and Mac, multi-host, and iOS, which is, I'll say, new. We're looking for design partners to help us kind of grow and expand the capabilities of the mobile testing space, but we do have an alpha release available. And we're looking to add additional platforms to this coverage as well. But the goal is to take a single set of tests using a single kind of syntax and structure, and be able to replay those tests across different platforms, in doing multi-host testing, like sort of large concerted tests. You might think of them as performance tests, but more the kind of concurrency tests, because a lot of games are multiplayer, and you want to be able to test from different clients simultaneously. And more importantly, for quality teams to be able to really reduce the impact in setting up those test environments by leveraging kind of the commodity hosting of Azure, AWS, and so on. So just taking a step back and looking at the whole life cycle, you've got concept development. These are very advanced, mature kind of capabilities in gaming. And from the launch and support, you would expect to see a lot of the same sort of continuous delivery lifecycle management products being used there. In fact, they use a lot of the same tools for defect tracking, log management, you name it. But when it comes to testing, it's just kind of a gray area. There is some pockets of capability in some of the larger studios where they may have developed something in-house, but that can be, as most of us would know from years in the enterprise space, it can be difficult and expensive to maintain. Excuse me. And that exposes risks to beta testing, exposing IP to competitors through kind of early access programs, low test coverage, and so on. And that's what we're trying to solve here. And how we do that is providing the first, as we see it, test automation solution designed specifically for gaming and designed for the play tester, for the individual whose job would otherwise be to do manual testing, which, by the way, doesn't have like a really solid career path in this space. You're doing manual testing for years, you might go into management of test teams, and that's generally about it. But using something like GameDriver would give testers a much more technical kind of career path to pursue. And it's a simple, intuitive interface. We've modeled this, parts of it around things like WebDriver and using XPath to identify objects, which I'll get into in a moment. We have the ability to record actions. So you can record the initial process that went into test that you're trying to build, and then use that as kind of the base, recording that you can modify and then make much more resilient through the scripting language. It's designed for cross-platform execution and engineered initially for supporting Unity, but GameDriver is designed and architected in a way that will allow us to take it from Unity to Unreal to Lumberyard to other engines as we go. So it stands outside of the gaming engine itself and gives us that interface into the engine for complete control. This is just a quick kind of overview of how it works, and I'll blow that out. The idea is that by inserting the GameDriver agent into your project, you don't need to instrument the game in any way. You just add the agent, and the agent takes care of all the communication with the game engine. So from the outside through the API, I'm able to pass commands into the game, like controls, like move in this direction or press this button for this amount of time. And I'm also able to extract information from the game at runtime, like, what's the player score right now? What's happening on the screen? What's the position of certain objects? And I can use that to validate the outcome of the test, or I can use it to kind of build more control into the test itself. So while I'm standing, this far apart from this other object, perform this action, and so on. And the goal is, once we built that test, we can execute it then across the various platforms. I think the benefits of test automation are pretty straightforward here. This is, of course, our standard sort of template for giving an overview, but your audience probably more than any understands the benefits of test automation over manual testing. Obviously, there's an upfront investment involved. You got to put in a little effort to gain that benefit. But once you're there, we've seen some pretty significant gains. For example, one customer out of Chicago as well, through in-context solutions, they have a VR solution for retail management to be able to lay out stores and environments in virtual reality before shipping them off to those outlets so that they can implement them. Think of like a Walgreens or a 7-Eleven. And they've reduced the amount of time spent doing manual testing by 85% by using GameDriver, which was significant for them.
Wow.
And with that, I think I've talked enough, and it's probably time to do some show and tell. Any questions from the line so far, Joe?
Yeah, we have multiple questions. I was going to wait to the end. I guess the first one before we get into it, are there any prerequisites for learning GameDriver I/O?
I always kind of caveat that by saying I'm not a trained developer. I picked all this up on my own years ago, and I started using tools like LoadRunner and UFT back, in the early 2000s. And I wanted this to be built in a way that would be easy for someone like me who has some development skills, but I'm not like a certified or accredited development person. We've also, like I said, modeled this after some of the more successful test automation solutions. So WebDriver, for example, uses XPath for location of objects, and as I'll highlight one of these steps where we're getting the value of a field, I'm using kind of an XPath-like syntax in order to extract that information. So I think it'll be, for people who are familiar with test automation, it'll be very easy. For people who are less familiar and they've done manual testing of video games to date, I don't see a huge barrier to entry here.
And someone else asked how they can get access to it. I guess it's just GameDriver.io.
Yeah, GameDriver.io. The process for requesting a license is simply fill out the form and we'll send you the license and information. The reason that there's a slight delay there is we want to make sure you have the latest build and information in order to get started. So it's not click a button to download, but we send you that information as soon as we've received the request.
Okay, good.
Typically within 12 hours.
Awesome.
All right. So what I'm going to show you was kind of touched on in the slides there for a second when I was outlining the features of GameDriver. But I'm going to demonstrate a simple sort of flow through this two-dimensional game. This is a demo game that's available from Unity directly. So you can download Unity to get started with this and then go to their asset store online and look for the 2D game kit. It's actually outlined in our tutorial as well on GameDriver.io/forum. And this whole process will be outlined there as well. So we wanted to keep it simple here, and then I'll get into some of the more advanced use cases with 3D game and maybe some of what we do internally to show you kind of the bounds of what can be done here. But I wanted to start off with something very simple.
Actually, one other thing, because you're showing code, Mike wants to know what languages does it support, what language bindings?
This is .NET, C#. The reason why we chose this is because it is the native language for Unity development.
Yep, okay.
Right, good. So for anybody working with Unity, this would be their first choice anyways. I understand, in the test automation space, we look for things like Python and Ruby and other languages. And we built this in a way that those bindings are easily accessible to us. But we started with C#.
Perfect. Thank you.
And when we go to Lumberyard, that's entirely written in C. I think so is Unreal, but we do plan to provide other bindings as well. All right, so I'm going to very quickly, I'll show you this game, and I've removed most of the sounds, but you might hear some of the thumping of movement and whatnot. And I've already inserted the GameDriver object into this, which I'll come back to in a second, but I just wanted to give you a very brief example of what this game does. So it's keyboard and mouse, it's a 2D side scroller here, and I can jump through the level and perform some actions, right? There's like a shooting thing. And the goal of this very simple demo is get 3 keys and then I fight the boss. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through all of that in the time that we have here because it actually takes a good 15, 20 minutes to play this short game. But just to give you a sense of how it looks and feels before we hop over to the automation. All right, so that's the first 3 scenes. To test this game with GameDriver, we add a single script here through an empty game object. And you can see it here on the right. I've added this GDIO or GameDriver.io agent script, which gives me some control over the game itself. And I'll just expand this a little so you can read it better. We provide our own logging mechanism, which I'll show you in a minute here. Gives some very detailed logging output of what's happening in the game. So as a user, I can run through the game first and see what keys were pressed, what actions for how long, so I don't need to guess at what inputs I need to provide. I simply play the game, and then I can emulate that in my tests. We can, we have to at some point bypass the inputs of the system by hooking into the keyboard inputs and hooking into the mouse inputs. These are the two primary interfaces for Unity. So whether you're building for PC or mobile, those two are the basic input mechanisms. And clicks simply become touch when we move from PC over to mobile. Here's where we capture the input events, and this one that says agent hostname or IP, I can test from this machine, or I can run a test from this machine to another machine. I've got my Mac beside me. Unfortunately, it's very hard to demo in this sort of environment, but anything that I can do locally, I can send those same tests to another machine located somewhere on the network.
Shane, people are just asking, is there any way to zoom in? I guess they're having a hard time just seeing.
Yeah, I can try. It's kind of tricky to blow up this interface. I'd have to maybe go. I can go to a lower resolution.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is possible. So I could go down to 1080p, for example.
Yeah, that actually might help.
How does that look on your end?
I think that looks better.
Okay.
All right, Guild, let me know if you have any issues, but I think that does look better.
It is a very cluttered interface. There's a lot going on in UD. They take care of everything from animation to building of objects to, the whole suite is here. So if you've never used Unity before, it's really quite impressive what they're able to get done in a single interface. So I'll jump over to the tests for a second, and I'll explain some of what we're doing here, and maybe make better use of the screen while I'm at it. So I don't need all of this. All right. So in this test, and I won't explain every single line, but what I'm doing is I'm connecting into the game through this launch method, and then I'm going to launch the game by clicking the start button. The way I have this written out allows me to test either locally or remotely, or I can test within the IDE itself, which I showed briefly there. Or I can test a standalone game, which I'll do in a moment here as well. And then when I connect into the game, and using one of these two methods, either launch an executable or test locally, I then enable the keyboard and mouse hooks, and now I have complete control over the game. And sorry, Joe, just to stop myself for a second, is the part of the screen that I have the scripting on visible from your side?
Yes.
I know we're kind of split up between screens right now.
Yep, it is.
Okay, great. So here's where things start to actually interact with the game. So I've captured a screenshot, and I'm going to do what's called waiting for an object. This wait for an object simply says, until this object exists, don't do anything. And it could sit there for as long as I want. Default's about 60 seconds. The next action, once the object exists, is to click on it. Now, I don't know where in the game this button exists. It could be part of a structure or hierarchy in the game itself. And I'll jump back here for just a second. You can see that we have a number of objects on the left. This is the hierarchy of the game. I don't know where the start button is, for example. I happen to know that it's in here in the start menu canvas, and there's some additional layers to getting to the start button. But I don't need to understand all of that in order for GameDriver to find it. We provide just a very simple / in syntax, which will go and find that button for me. Now, if there's multiple buttons, I might need to search for an instance of that button if they're cloned or have the same name. And there, I can show, actually it's shown right below how I do that, because the very next thing I do after I click the start button is wait for the info post to exist. Now, I did this because in the game itself, when I click play, there is sort of anchors in the game that are needed for me as the player to get from point A to point B. And the first is this info post that's right beside me, but that's not the one I want. I want this info post way over here because that's where I'm going to press down and jump to the next level, right? And I captured all this information from the recording of the actions below. So I'm going to wait for this second info post to appear in the game, and then I'm going to perform my actions. Now, skipping ahead a little bit, there's a couple of different methods for providing input. We provide pressing keys by their key name, or we can press a button by its label, which is like the game interface's way of defining horizontal movement versus vertical movement, or pressing enter or fire or something like that. So they give labels to buttons, as well as their kind of hard-coded keycode.s or keycode.space. But in this case, I found the most useful method was to just provide the raw key inputs. The next parameter or attribute for this method is how long do you want to press it for? And an approach that I found useful in this type of game, which is it's semi three-dimensional. You know, it looks like a two-dimensional game when we were playing it, but it's built using a 3D engine, and the sort of movement is highly dependent on the performance of the system that I'm on. So the machine that I have under my desk is very powerful. The laptop that I have beside me is much less powerful. And then I found if I provided the number of raw sort of frames to provide the input, it would perform differently from one machine to the next. So what we do here is we use the interface to get the frames per second of the machine that I'm running on. And I'll use that to calculate how long do I want to press the key, simply by multiplying or dividing or doing some sort of math on that number, which is the frames per second, to determine how many seconds or how long I want to press that key. That makes sense. So this is a very simple way here to say, press it for 1 second, and that 1 second is going to be the same whether it's on this machine or that machine, because I'm using the frames per second as my sort of modifier there. So I've got a couple of loops here. I'm going to say while I'm on scene 1, and that's another interface that we provide, get the active scene name. While we're in zone 1, perform these activities. Get the last frames per second, write it out to the console, and then if when I'm starting, I'm to the left of this, I'm actually starting at the end in this case. I'm saying when I get to the info post, we're going to press down and jump. That's this combination here. I've found the info post, I'm going to press down and jump together. These can be asynchronous actions or they can be synchronous. It's entirely up to the tester and the test that we're trying to achieve. Until I get to that info post, if I'm left of what was the gap when I tried to get there in the first place, I need to jump over it. If I fell in the hole, I need to go back to the left and try again. And if I've crossed the gap, continue moving to the left. If I've passed the info post, move to the right. If I'm past the info post, move back to the left. So these seem like complicated sort of loops, but in essence, they're like 1 or 2 key commands. And how I'm making those decisions is saying, get the position of Ellen, which is our main character object. Again, I don't need to understand where she exists in the game hierarchy. If Ellen's X position is less than a certain position, we want to move in a certain direction, right? So I've got a few different statements like this, where I'm getting the position of the info post, or I'm getting the position of Ellen, and comparing the two and saying, until I get there, do these actions, right? And this was all based on the recording. It took probably an hour and a half, maybe to 2 hours, including breaks, to write this out. But I'm just going to execute it here to give you an example of how that runs. I hit run. I'm taking my hands off the keyboard, and we're going to watch in the game here the same set of activities being performed. Now we provide some additional inputs into the game while it's being played. So you look at the top of the screen where it says mouse coordinates, date, time. All of that's provided by the GameDriver agent. And an interesting thing happened there that didn't happen when I was in the 4K resolution prior to resizing my screen. Ellen actually did fall in the hole. I'd written this test with the possibility that she could fall in the hole, but at 4K, she doesn't, because the game performs very differently at different resolutions. So because of that loop that I inserted saying, if you fall into the hole, jump back to the left and then try again, she was able to get out of the hole. And it's 4 lines of code that was able to do that. This is where the test ends. Again, very simple example. And I'll just jump back to the test here so you can see the result. We've got the launch, zone 1, zone 2, and quit. In zone 1, I've got a bunch of logging that was done, both to try and help me figure out what I'm doing and where in the test I am, but also the validations that took place. And we do validation through simple assertions. So we're using the same Microsoft unit test tools, or we can use NUnit. But those same methods are used here to assert what is success. And as long as I make it to zone 2 in the first in the first method, I consider that successful. How I've decided in the next zone whether or not I've succeeded was actually by a different parameter, and I'll expand this a little bit. It was the color of the key. If you notice there while I was replaying the test, Ellen's trying to get 3 keys. And that's the only visual identifier that I've actually succeeded, is the color of the key. So we're reaching into the key value here, and I'm doing a search. So I don't know, again, the exact name of the key. I know that it has these properties, right? It should be named something with a key icon in brackets clone, because these keys are automatically generated by the game. And it should have a field of color with a value as shown here, right? 1, 1, 1. And a transparency of 0. So while the transparency is 0, do these actions beneath it. And again, I'm starting this loop with my successful scenario, which is when the key value changes to a transparency of 1, then I've beat the level, and I can break from this loop. The rest of the loop is really just positional. I've got two statements here saying if I'm left of the key, move right. If I'm right of the key, move left. And if while we're moving right, if we're lower than the key, jump, which is why you would have seen her jump once or twice there. So I've done a lot of talking. It's a lot of different things being done, but it was very simple to build this test. And as you can see from when Ellen fell in the hole and was able to jump out, that we can build things to be very resilient as well. It doesn't have to be a strict move right and expect this to happen. The assumption there is games can be very fluid. The position of objects and enemies can change from recording to replay. And I'll give you another example of that here when I close this one out. Is there any questions on the line, Joe?
We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm away for the Q&A. But first thing, how do you get in these values? Is it because you already have a copy of the code in Unity? They're able to know the values, or is there a SPA?
Yeah,
is this like XPath?
So there's a couple of approaches, and I just have to kill the editor in my screen for some reason. Changing resolutions, I think, killed me. So the game itself will tell me the values both during kind of that recording phase when I'm capturing the actions, but we have in kind of an early point of or a proof of concept phase. I won't say that it's ready yet for customers. A tool that will allow you to inspect items in the game without having access to the development environment. And the reason for that is we talk to some companies where the testers are outside and don't have access to the code. Most companies do, where the QA team or the QA people or persons are close to the developers and they have that level of access where they can, ask questions like, what am I looking for here? What value should I see? That sort of thing. Or they have, access to the code itself.
Perfect.
But of course, we want to make this as flexible as possible. So we've proven out a solution for being able to inspect objects during runtime, and that's something that we hope to make available very soon. Actually, so I'm going to load that up, and while that's loading up, there's a whole other game that I'm going to load up in the background here. But I wanted to show the standalone execution as well. So it's going to be a little bit different because I've resized my screen. I think the game in standalone runs at 1080p, so it's going to probably fill up my whole screen. But just by changing this one input for the test itself, the test property, and this is something that, by the way, if you're running in like Azure, for example, you can override these settings using the external commands through the Visual Studio console or command line interface. So from this, I haven't changed anything else. I hit run, and it's going to run my tests again, but this time it's going to launch the executable, which is a standalone build of this game. And it's going to run through the same set of actions. So yeah, it does occupy my whole screen here, and hopefully you can see fairly well what's going on. A lot better resolution on my side anyways.
No, it looks good here.
And that time she made it over the jump on the first try. Sometimes, because of, again, the frames per second, she'll overshoot the info post, and you saw her going back and forth there. But until we reach that specific value, we just keep trying. And this was the key that up in the right-hand corner that changed its value.
Oh, cool.
And that's the end of my test. Right, so in zone 2, again, we can see what was going on, the key coordinates, and so on. And these are the types of values that would be output. Sorry, go ahead.
That's an executable? So it's not even like you had to have Unity running? It was just the executable of the game?
No, that is a standalone executable.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. All right, so this is actually a really new kind of attempt at a demo for me. So let's pray that the demo gods are kind. But what I wanted to show is, you know, the same sort of scenario, but in a 3D environment. I haven't built quite as comprehensive a test here, but this kind of demonstrates the early phases of testing, right? And so I don't know a lot about this game. I just got my hands on it recently. Let's see. Screen here. Okay. So I do some experimentation, right? And I've got this game that I'm going to connect to. I'm going to do the basics, enable my keyboard, mouse hooks. I've added some additional kind of date, time reporting to show me when events are occurring, so that I can look at the logs and understand, supply this input, what is the output, so on. Same character, by the way. So this game is a 3D version of the 2D game kit. Is the 3D game kit, which is a much larger game. But in this case, there's like a really stripped down version of it that's just Ellen in a blank space. And I've gone and added these 4 bad guy objects here, and she can interact with them, but the game doesn't do anything beyond that. This was really my attempt to try and experiment and see, how would I test this game. So I'll come back to my script. We've got Ellen again. I don't know where she is or what she does. And I'm going to try a couple of different approaches here. And you'll see that, like as I mentioned, we've got the different methods of input, one being the raw key codes that we would insert. The other is when we use these sort of labels. And we've called that the move interface. And move allows me to call the horizontal and vertical movement inputs without knowing what their key values are for any combination between keyboard and mouse or anything like that. But similar approach, right? So I've got actually how Unity and other game engines determines, are you doing this in a positive direction or a negative direction? So horizontal in a positive moves forward, horizontal in a negative moves backwards, right? Same thing for vertical, up, down, or left, right, whatever verticals map to is a positive or negative. And then I do some other things down here where I'm going to try some complex movements in a more synchronous approach. So instead of one movement followed by waiting for the movement to complete, which is our wait for empty input, I'm just going to perform all of these things together and see what happens. And then after that, I did, this was like last night, I think, or the night before, I said, okay, I inserted the bad guys that you saw there, I'm going to search for them, and then I'm going to move my character to that position and hit them, right? So I'm searching for an enemy called Chomper. I don't know the full details of it, just that there's an enemy there with the name label called Chomper 1, Chomper 2, and Chomper 3. These are all clones of the Chomper, what do they call them, prefab, which comes with this game toolkit. And then I'm going to use Chomper's location to move Ellen to where Chomper exists, and we're doing a move, from its original 2 gigabyte size down to like 80 megabytes or something like that. So it's very small. When I move Ellen, she's not going to move gracefully. She just kind of glides across the floor. Not like when I provide the movement inputs like I do up here. That's because there isn't a full kind of interface for moving Ellen using this approach, using what they call the navigation mesh. And because of that, she just kind of glides to that position. But it does show you kind of what's possible. I don't know maybe the path to get from A to B. I'm just going to say move from where you are now to over there using the move to point command, and she's going to do that. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. So very simple. It's going to load up again. There's a couple of noises coming from the bad guys here, so ignore those. In a few seconds, this is another interesting bit with a 3D game, is there's a whole lot of background processing going on that as a tester, I would probably say, okay, before I hand this off to my test team or whoever to do additional work, I would want to find out from the developers why this game takes so long to initialize, but it does. So actually now would be a great time to take any quick questions on this if we're waiting. I think it takes up to 20 seconds or so.
Okay, yeah. Ed just wants to know, does this include smartphone games like Madden, NFL? Would GameDriver work on that? Those type of games?
Yeah, so it's something we've talked about, the ability to hook into a game after it's built. It actually has to be built with the GameDriver libraries in place.
Oh, okay.
So assuming you could get your hands on the code, absolutely.
Nice.
So she performed some quick actions there, which were kind of like, her walking across the floor, first right, up, down, and then in diagonal. And that was the combination of movements. And now GameDriver is literally looking for the monsters and saying move to that point and then hit them.
Cool.
And that's it. When you can see her kind of gliding across the floor there, again, that goes back to this game being a very stripped down version of kind of a 3D environment. But it does demonstrate some of the uses as well. How much time do we have, by the way?
We have about 12 minutes, and like I said, we have a lot of questions coming in. So,
okay, so I'll just show one more thing before we do that.
Okay.
And this is something we do internally. So I'll close some of these projects, and I'll just open what we call the toolkit. So when I do QA of our own product, right, we've got a very small team, and I do a lot of the testing of this myself. One of the things I do is I run it through this sort of toolkit of tests to make sure that GameDriver is doing everything that it should do, right? And we run it in the IDE, standalone, Mac, Windows, mobile. There's a lot of testing involved. Testing of a testing product is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is like kind of automated, right? So, we do the build and then it runs through a bunch of these tests. So this toolkit, it's not by any stretch of the imagination an actual game. This is just something we've built in Unity to help us kind of understand what GameDriver can do and what's working, what's not working. And I'll just highlight a couple of things here. So in the beginning of this test, you'll see a series of this get object field value. And these are the different approaches to capturing information from objects in the game. So as I mentioned, I don't need to, I can use the full path to an object, canvas/load menu/name, and get that value. I can search for it using any combination of properties for that object and get a similar result, right? So I run through all of these tests to make sure that all of those, we call it a hierarchy path. It's very similar to XPath. A lot more assertions going on here because of course this is internal. But there's something that I do here that I wanted to highlight, the kind of power of GameDriver. We're not limited to what the user interface can do in a game. So if you're testing with, let's say, Appium or some other kind of user interface level testing tool, right? That user interface testing tools can be limited to testing what's visible to the user at runtime. And that's fine for some approaches, but really wanted to expose the internals of the game so that we can interrogate objects, get their information, and then perform much more comprehensive result or testing in combination with being able to do the user inputs that you would expect, the touch or keyboard and mouse type of input. But one of the things I do here is I'm actually going to take an object and rotate it. That's not something that is available to the user in the game. There's no keyboard control for taking an object in the game and rotating it in this case. It's just something that we're doing to see that it can be done. So we provide this type of control where I can get into the game itself and say, you know what, flip that object, and it will. So I'm just going to run this, make sure that I'm running against the right environment. Standalone, nope. IDE. Run this test. It's gonna the pause here at the beginning has nothing to do with startup time or anything like that. That's actually, there's all of those conversion tests running that I mentioned, looking for values of objects, and then it's going to jump right in and do some quick movements. Move the keyboard around, make sure that I get back to the point that I expected to. Okay, I'm done. And then in this one, I flip that object. And then I move it around, and you can see the red pointer that appears each time that I click on an object in the interface. Something that we provide for like a visual indicator that, yes, this is the mouse and this is what's going on right now. Now this this resolution is terrible for these types of tests. I wish you could see this at the proper 1080p. Here we create an object on the screen and then we move that object, but yeah, that doesn't seem to like the current resolution. So I'll close that. Anyways, I just wanted to highlight that very cool piece that I thought shows the power of GameDriver, because we're able to get into the engine and say, the user can't do this, but I'm going to do it.
Huh, that's wild.
So what do you think?
I love it, and a ton of questions. Let's try to get some of these questions in, Shane, because a lot of people are saying it seems like a really great solution. Justin wants to know, what is GameDriver or automated testing useful for in terms of games? Can you check against bugs or visual quality? I know you can navigate things, but how do you know if there's an error or if there's a visual wackiness going on?
That's a good point. So again, our intent was not to eliminate the need for manual testing, but to reduce that dependency. And if you think about the kind of testing environment where, let's say I built the game itself, now I'm handing it off to a bunch of testers, I want them to be able to focus on things like visual quality of objects and that type of kind of not quantifiable, but the sort of non-quantifiable qualities of a game that make it worth playing. And to do that, we got to take away the need for them to go in and create a character each time and click through the user interface and make sure these buttons are working. And it's sort of the middle ground between unit testing, which is still being performed by developers. By the way, Unity provides a unit testing capability for Unity projects, and the play tester, who's going to get what they assume is a finished product, which everything is working. What are the types of tests that they would need to do each and every time to make sure that the functionality is there, so that they can focus on those other aspects of the game?
Perfect. Praveen wants to know, what do you think the career path is in this field? It would be great if I could get some details about the future of VR games. Do you see that? I haven't heard much about VR games still. Thoughts on that, career growth-wise, for a tester?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of VR. I've got my my Index VR helmet right here.
Nice.
I'm completely bought into the VR experiment. That customer success story that I mentioned earlier is a VR project, and we were quite surprised that a lot of their testing, which was manual and required somebody to put on a helmet and do this types of validation, could be automated through GameDriver with very few gaps that we needed to fill for them. In terms of the career path for testers, there's a ton of demand in this space for not certified but qualified individuals, people with experience in quality. And a lot of the people that I've talked to in gaming who are doing quality have come from the enterprise software space, because enterprise software knows how to do this. We've been doing it for a long time. Gaming, which was traditionally manual testing, the manual tester didn't have a very long career path ahead of them, and oftentimes would burn out because, like I said, as we near crunch time of a release, they would just get more testers in and then work them to death in order to meet that deadline. So for those who make it, you can become a manager. But what we're trying to achieve here is the same thing that we saw in the enterprise software space, which is to open up an entire career path for quality professionals in gaming, because we believe that this industry, by the way, is $150 billion a year. It's bigger than television, bigger than sports, it's bigger than music. It's bigger than actually the top 5 sports combined, and growing, year over year at an astounding rate. It's also proven to be recession-proof and pandemic-proof.
Yeah.
The gaming industry right now during this pandemic has flourished. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people that understand quality, and we're hoping to facilitate a broader career path for them.
Yeah, I think I just saw an article today that game stocks have been going up by like 25% or something because people at home. So along the same lines, Krishnavini, I'm terrible with names, wants to know how much testing is actually needed for great games, great quality games. Like I said, back in the old days, I talked to a developer and they're like, once the game's released, we don't care about it. But it sounds like that's changed.
That has changed, yeah. And testing is super important. In the larger studios, like I said, employ thousands of testers that test around the clock. Smaller studios, I talked to one called Playdead Studios out in Europe somewhere, I can't remember the country. They had one guy working on their small project for 6 years. So if you can imagine playing the same game over and over and over again every day for 6 years, it's quite boring for him. He started playing with those game bongos and dance floor mats, which was not the intended use of the game, but just to keep himself occupied for that 6-year project. And he was really excited to hear that there might be a better approach.
Absolutely. Adita wants to know, is the focus on the client-side performance and reaction times, or visual rendering, or the functionality for GameDriver?
I'd say more on functionality at this point. We're actually working, where we had done some sort of early work with Intel, who have a performance optimization tool for Unity, which allows their customers to optimize the game assets for performance. Those two examples I showed you are terribly optimized. They're just demo kits, right? And my computer, which is like an 8-core i9 with tons of memory and a huge graphics card, struggles to play those very simple games because they're not optimized. But they're not problem, I would say. They're quite successful at what they're doing, but their challenge is driving those workloads, driving those performance-focused and optimization-focused workloads. They don't have a way to do that. So using GameDriver plus whatever optimization tool is in place, you can automate that process as well.
Great. Justin wants to know, if some reason someone forgets to remove GameDriver from the build and it ships, can people use it as a cheat?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
actually,
nice.
That was one of the questions from a very large studio that we talked to recently. And they said, but they were used to instrumenting entire games to do the test automation, which is the approach that they'd taken before. So they would go into every scene and create paths for the automation to interface with, whereas we're providing a single agent, and we're just saying, be very careful to remove that agent, otherwise you leave yourself exposed.
That's funny. Adita wants to know, does it integrate with runners like Unity Test Runner, or does it work on more of a native C# framework like NUnit?
So right now we're using the native like Microsoft test tools and NUnit frameworks. I've heard people using Unity test tools or their test runner because it uses the same sort of libraries from Microsoft to be able to run those. So that's entirely possible. And then we do have customers who are running these tests in the cloud. So every night they push their build. They run 300 functional validation tests through GameDriver, and that's it's based on the same tools that Microsoft provides, but they're not the same tools. They've rebuilt those for use in Azure.
Is there a POV for console-based games?
Absolutely. So from our perspective, wherever Unity goes, we want to go with them. We're in talks right now with one of the major console platforms. I won't say who because we haven't signed anything yet. But the goal, the objective is to be able to run those tests on the target platform as any test team would. So build locally, build standalone, build on the console, and be able to run it from there. And we're doing the same with iOS, by the way.
Awesome. At what stage of game development can the framework be used, or do you see it being used in the wild?
I would say from the onset, projects that are in flight, of course, there's a little more kind of uplift to converting from whatever in-house or manual practice to an automated one. But certainly there's a lot of value, as we've seen from our customers there. But from the very beginning of a project, you can start to automate. If there's an interface that somebody can test with, as I showed with the very simple 3D example, if there's a way to work, play the game manually, then we can start to insert automation there as well.
Awesome. And Lucian's been asking these questions. He's actually a game tester, so he's very excited about it. So there's a lot of questions. Another one is, can it be used in testing level design, art, like collisions, occluders, and nav mesh?
Yeah. The nav mesh one we're working with now, as you may have noticed with the player movement. The collisions, we've got some thoughts on how to achieve that. To be completely open with you guys, we're looking for somebody to help us understand use cases better, because obviously, like, visual collisions is something that it's ugly. It's sometimes hard to track down. Even in games like I play, if you didn't notice from my background, I play Destiny a lot. This game's been in production for 10 years, and people still find gaps and holes in the game where they can fall through and do something that they weren't supposed to. So we're looking really for a team or a project that is trying to solve that problem, to help us understand how we can better the solution through the automation. But that's very much one use case that we're interested in.
All right, Lucian, this is for you. So if you have any input, definitely hook up with Shane. You see his info down below, GameDriver.io. Yep. So a few more. I know we're a little over time, but we just have like 3 more questions to get through. Mike wants to know, what additional items need to be included inside the appropriate software to get this to work, i.e. locator strategies that are used in web apps. Is XPath the only pathway currently available to locate elements?
Okay, so sorry to break that down. The first part of that question was
what additional items? Yeah.
What additional items? Just the agents. So for us, we have a small set of libraries. It's under, I think, 10 megabytes, which is added to the game folders under the assets directory. And then you add one script, and that's it. That script needs to be launched as part of the initial sort of launch of the game. But any scene that launches within the game that contains that script gives us access to it. So one of the customers is they built a separate scene that loads ours and all of their utility assets and then launches their project. And then that's one approach. I found it simply just, if you've got a start screen or whatever the first scene that appears. You just add it there. You don't need to add it to each and every scene. Once it's there, it's resident, it's loaded, and it won't be destroyed.
Lucian has another great question. He says, one of the most repetitive tasks in game testing is applying modifiers and testing the output in relation to the environment, enemies, etc. Can this be automated easily? I already use an in-house solution. For context, it's a shooter game.
Right. Great question. And so you may be familiar with Unity's simulation platform. The Unity, I always get the name wrong, but if you look for Unity Simulator, they provide the sort of platform to run simulations in your game using different settings, different parameters, and for that exact scenario, you want to be able to modify damage percentages, shields, health values, all that stuff to get the sort of level tuning and the mechanics just right. And that's the way to do it. Now, where I will say is we've been talking with Unity about this. I won't say to what extent, but the idea is, do your testing in-house, do your automation in-house and early in development, and then when you using GameDriver or driving those workloads and understanding kind of the scenarios that you want to play through, take those to the Unity simulator platform and run them at a large scale. And then
Perfect.
And run millions of different scenarios.
All right, Shane, time for just one last question because we're 7 minutes over. I want to respect your time and the guild's time. Chris wants to know, so with GameDriver embedded or hooked in, is the code test aware of the locators of objects by name, ID, or other locators? Think of path from actor object. I guess how's it aware of the elements?
We only introspect objects that we interact with. So rather than instrumenting every object or having that sort of loaded up in memory, which is very expensive, if we interact with something, we can get any or all fields or properties from that object. So if I want to know Ellen's position, hair color, damage, anything, I can get that, but I'm not forcing the game to tell all of that to me up front, which again would probably kill your game with the overhead.
Right, and Shane, like I said, a lot of questions came in. I may have a few more. I may send them your way, but really,
Sure.
Thank you so much for this demo. People are loving it. Before we go, any parting words of wisdom you want to leave the guild?
No, really. I think this is just a great opportunity. I'm really glad that you invited us out. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And if you or someone you know is working in a game project or Unity project, and I say game but there's a lot of great work being done in Unity that's not gaming, let us know. We'd love to talk to them.
Awesome. Thanks again, Shane. Really appreciate what you've done here, and I think you got something. So I'd love to see this grow for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, cheers.
Pleasure.
All right, so once again, that was Shane Evans. Thank you for your automation awesomeness. And like I said, definitely check it out at GameDriver.io. And if you want to get in contact with Shane, maybe you work in the industry, you have some user cases, you'd like to try this on, let me know and I'll forward your info to him. So sounds good. Thank you, Gonzalo, for joining. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Justin, Arijit, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And just a reminder, this edition of the Test Guild Meetup is sponsored by Testum. And Testum wants to give back to the community during this time of need. So make sure to check out the free community plan down below. Click on that button. Show some love. You get 1,000 runs per month free. The offer doesn't run forever. Doesn't last forever. So make sure to take the offer up now. Sign up below. Lock it in. And also, I have to give a plug here. I'm doing an online conference dedicated just to performance testing called Perf Guild. And Perf Guild is dedicated 100% to helping you succeed with performance testing. Our goal is to learn a tip, tool, technique, or best practice to help you with your performance engineering efforts. And for waiting all the way to the end, you're going to get $50 off in Guild Coin. All you need to do is go to guildconferences.com, click on Perf Guild, and then apply this code Guild coin. So Guild Coin 50, you just won $50 for staying to the end at the meetup. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate everyone. Any questions? This has been awesome. So see you all next week. I'm actually looking for a speaker for next week. So if you're interested or know someone, let me know. And like I said, this doesn't have to be super polished. I'm looking for even first-time speakers that want to share a tip, tool, or technique, or maybe you want to work out a thought process that you have and get input from the guild. This is a great platform for you to join. So if you have something, let me know. joe@testguild.com. Send me an email. Maybe we can get you to speak next week. So thank you, everyone, for your awesomeness. Really appreciate it. And I will see you next week, same time. The guild is really grateful for you joining. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned, just go send me an email, joe@testguild.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers. Ah.